I woke up sometime after 2. No noise, no reason. Just that quiet shift you feel before something changes. Laura moved beside me, not like someone turning over in sleep, but controlled, deliberate. She pulled her pillow closer, tighter than usual, one arm tucked underneath it. At first, I thought she was just getting comfortable. Then I saw the light. A soft glow leaked out from beneath the edge of the pillow. Just for a second. Enough to cut through the dark and land somewhere in the back of my mind. I didn't move. I kept my breathing steady. The screen shifted again, brighter this time. A name flashed across it, clear, unfamiliar. Ryan. Not a coworker I'd heard about. Not a friend. Just a name that didn't belong anywhere in our life. She must have felt me wake, or maybe she just sensed the moment hanging there. The light disappeared instantly. The phone went dark. Her body stilled. Then she did something I hadn't seen her do before. She pretended to be asleep. Her breathing changed, too even, too measured. The kind of rhythm you pick when you're aware of being watched. I lay there beside her, staring at the ceiling, feeling something settle in my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Recognition. Nothing had happened out loud. No words. No confrontation. Just a name on a screen and the way she hit it. But it was enough. Because whatever that was, it wasn't new. It didn't start tonight. Tonight was just the first time it showed itself. And lying there in the dark, a few inches from her, I understood something I couldn't unthink. Something in our life had already broken. I just hadn't seen where it cracked. Before that night, there wasn't anything obvious to point at. No single moment I could isolate and say, that's where it changed. We had just moved to Boise a few months earlier. New house, new job for me, new routine for both of us. The kind of reset people talk about like it fixes things automatically. On the surface, it worked. We had dinner most nights. Nothing elaborate, just something simple at the table, the same way we always had. We'd watch a show after, talk about small things. Work stories, groceries, plans for the weekend that usually stayed as plans. It wasn't exciting, but it was steady. And steady had always been enough. Laura adjusted faster than I did. She found places she liked, got into her rhythm. Coffee in the morning, a walk some evenings, calls with friends I didn't know well but had heard about over the years. If there was a shift, it didn't come all at once. It showed up in smaller ways. She started keeping her phone closer. Not in a noticeable way at first, just within reach. On the counter when she cooked. On the couch beside her instead of on the table. I remember noticing it one night when it buzzed, and she picked it up before I could even glance at the screen. Quick, almost automatic. I didn't think much of it then. People get used to their phones. That's what I told myself. Because the version of Laura I knew had never been guarded. She used to leave her phone anywhere, kitchen, bedroom, even the car sometimes. If it rang and she was busy, she'd ask me to check who it was. There was nothing hidden in our routine. That's why I didn't look for anything. Even when she started spending more time on it, I explained it away. New city, new connections. Maybe she was just trying to stay in touch with people from before. It made sense. Or at least it did at the time. There wasn't a moment where I questioned her directly. Not before that night. Because until then, I didn't have a reason to doubt her. And more than that, I didn't have the habit of doubt. That only came later. After that night, the details didn't feel separate anymore. They lined up. The phone wasn't just something she used more. It became something she managed. Always angled away. Always within reach. If she left the room, it went with her. Even for a minute. I noticed the password next. Not the fact that she had one. She always did. But that it had changed. I saw it in the way her thumb hesitated once. Like muscle memory had to catch up. That stuck with me. It wasn't proof of anything. But it wasn't nothing either. She started falling asleep with the phone in her hand. Screen dimmed. Fingers still wrapped around it like it might disappear if she let go. If I shifted in bed, even slightly, the screen would go dark before I could see anything. Every time. At first, I kept explaining it away. Habit. Stress. Adjustment. All the same reasons I had used before. But the explanations started to feel thinner. Because it wasn't just one thing anymore. It was the consistency of it. The way her attention moved. Not dramatically, not enough for an argument, but enough to register. Conversations cut shorter. Responses delayed. That small pause before she answered something simple, like she was coming back from somewhere else. I began to recognize patterns. Not obvious ones. Subtle. Repeated. She checked her phone at the same times. Late evening. Right before bed. Sometimes in the middle of the night, when she thought I was asleep. That was new. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. I stopped asking casual questions. Stopped pointing things out. Not because I didn't notice, but because I did. There's a point where curiosity turns into something else. Something quieter. I wasn't looking for reassurance anymore. I was watching for consistency. And the more I paid attention, the clearer it became that whatever had started, it wasn't random. It had structure. And I was no longer part of it. I didn't confront her. That was the first real change. Before, I would have asked something simple. Casual. Tried to close the gap before it got wider. That had always been my instinct. Fix things early. Keep them from turning into something else. But this time I didn't. Because somewhere along the way, I understood that whatever this was, it wasn't new. It wasn't a misunderstanding waiting to be cleared up. It had already taken shape, already moved past the point where a question could undo it. So I stayed quiet. Not out of fear, not out of denial, out of recognition. If you've made it this far, this story clearly caught your attention. If you're enjoying it, drop a like on the video. It helps me see what kind of stories you want more of next. Let's keep going. There's a moment when you stop trying to confirm something and start accepting it. Not with certainty, but with enough weight that you don't need the rest filled in right away. That's where I was. I stopped listening to what she said and started measuring how it fit. The timing, the tone, the gaps between things. It became less about believing her and more about observing her. And once that shift happens, it doesn't reverse. Everything inside me went still. Not numb, just quiet. Like a switch had been flipped somewhere I didn't know existed. The part of me that reacted, that tried to fix, that needed answers, that part stepped back. In its place, something more controlled settled in. I didn't need to know everything anymore. I just needed to see clearly. I stopped thinking in terms of us. Stopped framing things as something we would work through. That idea faded on its own, without resistance. Because if something was already happening, if there was already someone else involved, then the version of us I was holding on to didn't exist the way I thought it did. And my role in it had changed. I wasn't inside it anymore. I was watching it from the outside, even while standing in the same room. That was the break. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a quiet understanding that whatever this was, it wasn't mine to fix. And I wasn't going to try. Once I stopped reacting, it became easier to see things as they were. Not what I thought they meant. Not what I hoped they were. Just what they were. She started staying up later than usual. Not in a noticeable way at first. Just 10 minutes, then 20. I'd turn off the light, settle in, and after a while, the soft glow would come back on beside me. She thought I was asleep. Most nights, I kept my breathing steady and let the silence do the work. I didn't need to look directly. The reflection was enough. Small movements. The way her fingers paused before typing, then moved quickly again. There was a rhythm to it. Message. Wait. Response. Sometimes she smiled. Not openly, just a slight shift at the corner of her mouth. The kind of reaction that used to belong to shared moments. Now it happened quietly, directed somewhere else. Not toward me. I didn't interrupt. I didn't move. I just kept track. The name appeared more often after that first night. Ryan. It showed up in quick flashes, notifications she cleared too fast, messages she angled away without thinking I'd notice. But I noticed. Not every word. Not every sentence. Just enough. One evening, she left her phone on the kitchen counter while she stepped out to take a call. It lit up before I even realized I was looking at it. A message preview. I wish you were here. No context. No explanation. Just that line. I didn't pick up the phone. I didn't scroll. I didn't need to. Because by then, it wasn't about catching her in something. It was about confirming what was already there. I went back to what I was doing, same as before. Same pace. Same routine. When she came back in, she checked the phone immediately. Her expression shifted for a second, tight, alert, before settling again. I filed that away. Everything became like that. Small moments. Repeated patterns. No confrontation. No questions. Just observation. And the more I watched, the clearer it became that whatever she was building, it didn't include me. I waited longer than I needed to. Not because I was unsure, but because I wanted to be certain that whatever I saw wouldn't leave room for interpretation. Once I crossed that line, there was no going back to assumptions. It happened on a Friday night. She had a glass of wine with dinner, then another while we watched something neither of us was paying attention to. By the time we went to bed, her movements were slower, less precise. The phone was still in her hand when she drifted off. That part hadn't changed. I stayed still for a while, listening to her breathing settle into something real this time. Not the controlled rhythm from before. Actual sleep. Only then did I move. Carefully, I slid the phone out from her hand without waking her. No reaction. No shift. Just silence. For a second, I held it there, not unlocking it yet. There's a point where curiosity stops being passive, where it becomes a decision. This was that point. The screen lit up easily. Same passcode pattern I had watched her use enough times without realizing I was memorizing it. Messages opened immediately. There wasn't any confusion. No guessing. No gray area. It wasn't just conversation. It wasn't something you could misread if you wanted to. The tone was clear. Familiar in a way that didn't belong to casual talking. They weren't building something new. They were already inside it. Plans were there. Specific ones. Times, places, adjustments to schedules that now made sense in ways they hadn't before. References to meetings that weren't work, explanations for nights that had felt slightly off, but never enough to question. And then there were the parts that didn't need context. Future tense. Not careful. Not hidden behind jokes or vague language. Direct. That was the part that settled it. This wasn't temporary. It wasn't something that had just started. It had direction. I scrolled further than I should have, but not out of shock. Just to understand the scale of it. How far it reached into the life I thought I was still part of. Then I saw something else. A name mentioned once, then again. Emily. Not in the way Laura's name appeared. Different context. Separate. It didn't take long to connect it. Ryan wasn't alone in this. He had a life somewhere else too. I put the phone down exactly where I found it. Same position. Same angle. Laura didn't move. I lay back down beside her, staring at the ceiling again, but it felt different this time. Not heavier. Clearer. The next day, I found Emily online, and I sent the message without overthinking it. I didn't bring it up the next day, or the day after. There wasn't anything left to confirm, and I wasn't interested in a conversation that would only circle around denial and partial truths. By then, I understood something simple. If I spoke too early, I'd only give her space to adjust the story. So I let it move on its own. Emily replied the same evening I messaged her. Short at first. Careful. She didn't believe me right away, and I didn't expect her to. I sent only what was necessary. Names. Patterns. A few screenshots. Enough to make it real without turning it into something emotional. After that, I stepped back. What happened next didn't involve me directly. 3 days later, Laura came home late. Not unusual on its own, but there was something different in the way she walked in. Slower. Her shoulders slightly tense, like she was carrying something she couldn't set down yet. She didn't greet me right away. Set her bag down. Stood there for a second longer than usual. Then she said it. There was something at work today. I looked up from where I was sitting, but I didn't interrupt. She hesitated. Some woman showed up outside the building. Caused a scene. Security had to get involved. Her voice wasn't steady. I nodded once, like I was following the story without needing details. She was saying things, Laura continued. Accusing people. It didn't make any sense. I let a few seconds pass before responding. Did it involve you? She looked at me then. Directly. Searching for something in my face. I don't know, she said. She mentioned a name. Ryan. Silence settled between us. Not heavy. Just final. She waited. For a reaction. A question. Something she could respond to. Something she could shape. I didn't give her that. I just held her gaze for a moment. Then said, evenly, I know who you were texting every night. That was it. No raised voice. No explanation. Just a statement. Her expression shifted. Quick. Uncontrolled. Not denial. Not confusion. Recognition. She didn't ask how I knew. Didn't try to explain right away. For a second, she just stood there, like the ground had moved slightly under her feet. And in that moment, I could see it clearly. Whatever she had been managing, whatever she thought was contained, it wasn't anymore. Not because of what I said, because it had already started to come apart. After that, things didn't escalate the way people expect. There wasn't a single argument that defined it. No moment where everything came out at once. It moved differently, fragmented, uneven, like something already unstable trying to hold its shape a little longer. Laura tried to talk that night. Not immediately, but later, when the house had gone quiet again. She stood in the doorway of the bedroom, said my name once, then again when I didn't respond. I think we need to. I didn't look up. There's nothing to go through. That stopped her. Not because of the words, but because of how they landed. Flat. Final. Without space for negotiation. Over the next few days, everything around her started shifting. Emily didn't stay silent. Whatever she had discovered, she pushed it forward, directly, publicly, without hesitation. I didn't ask for details, but I saw the effects. Calls came in at odd hours. Laura would step outside to answer them, voice low, tense. Sometimes she didn't answer at all, just stared at the screen until it stopped. There was an incident at her office. Then another. Security got involved more than once. Someone mentioned police, though I never saw them myself. Ryan disappeared from the situation almost immediately. No messages, no calls, at least none that reached her phone where I could see the reaction. Whatever he had been part of, he stepped out of it the moment it turned visible. That told me enough about him. Laura, on the other hand, couldn't step away so easily. Her workplace found out. Not through her. Not through anything controlled. It spread the way things do when too many people are involved and no one is holding it together anymore. She stopped going in after a few days. Stayed home instead, moving through the house like it didn't belong to her the same way anymore. Not because I said anything, because of everything happening around her. She tried again to talk. Different approaches each time. Softer, more direct, then defensive. I didn't engage. Not out of spite. Just because there was nothing left to exchange. I had already separated what mattered. Finances, documents, accounts. Quietly, without drawing attention to it. Everything was in order before anything officially ended. When I filed for divorce, it didn't feel like a reaction. It felt like the next step in something that had already finished. By the time the paperwork was ready, there wasn't much left to discuss. We moved through the process without conflict. Not because we agreed on everything, but because there was no energy left for disagreement. The parts that usually turn into arguments, property, accounts, timelines, they were already separated. I had taken care of that early. Not in a rush. Not reactively. Just methodically, piece by piece, once I understood where things were heading. Laura signed without pushing back. That was the only part that stood out. No negotiation. No attempts to revisit anything. Just a quiet acceptance of terms that, a few weeks earlier, she would have questioned. I didn't ask why. Some things don't need to be explained once the structure around them is gone. The day it finalized, we met at the office. Sat across from each other with a table between us that felt wider than it was. Papers were passed, signatures placed, copies made. No conversation beyond what was required. At one point, she looked up, like she was about to say something. Then didn't. I didn't fill the space. When it was done, I stood, gathered my copy, and left without waiting. The house had already been arranged to sell. Most of what mattered was either in storage or already moved. What was left behind didn't carry weight anymore. I packed the last of my things that evening. Not much, just what I had kept separate from the beginning. Clothes, tools, a few personal items that still felt like mine. The rest stayed where it was. I walked through each room once before leaving. Not to remember anything, just to make sure there was nothing I needed to take with me. There wasn't. At the door, I stopped for a second, not out of hesitation, but habit. The kind that comes from doing something the same way for years. Then I stepped out and closed it behind me. No noise. No final moment. Just a quiet end to something that had already finished long before the paperwork caught up. Sometimes I go back to that night. Not often. Just enough to remember how quiet it was. The room was dark. Nothing out of place. No argument. No sign that anything had already shifted beyond repair. Just a small light under a pillow and a name that didn't belong. Ryan. At the time, it felt like a discovery. Like something had just started to reveal itself. But looking back, it wasn't. It was already there. Fully formed. I just hadn't seen it yet. That moment didn't change anything. It only made it visible. Everything that followed. The patterns, the messages, the collapse. It all traced back to something that had already taken root long before I noticed. That's the part that stays with me. Not the ending. Just the understanding that some things don't break when you hear them. They break long before. You just happen to be there the moment it shows. That's the end of this story. If you made it all the way here, consider subscribing to stay with us. I've placed a couple of recommended videos on screen for you. Pick one and keep watching. I'll see you in the next story.